A comprehensive explanation of the solution for the measurement problem of quantum mechanics, as proposed by the Reallusion hypothesis. To grasp how the measurement problem is solved as proposed by the Reallusion hypothesis, it is necessary to understand the difference between the universe as it exists on its own, without being perceived within our reality, versus the universe within our reality. The Reallusion hypothesis proposes that our reality is a quantum-based simulation, and that the simulation is part of consciousness itself. Most people might expect that a simulation hypothesis would propose that the universe is what is simulated, while our consciousness exists separate from it as it perceives what is within the simulation. But, rather than the universe being what is simulated in a process that is separate from our consciousness, the Reallusion hypothesis proposes that the physical expression of the universe and our consciousness are created together within the same process, so that the universe cannot be separated from our conscious perspective. Thus, in the absence of our realities, the universe exists within a phenomenon that is somewhat analogous to the data within a computer program. The data within the program of the universe is called the QTF datastate of the universe. It should be understood that the reference to the QTF datastate of the universe being a type of data that is analogous to the data within a computer program lacks much of the physics of what the QTF datastate involves. But since there is nothing in our present technology that resembles it, the analogy to the data within a computer program allows a comparison to be made in concept, but only in concept, not in the physics that are involved. The QTF datastate of the universe is the largest component of all the data within the QTF datastate, but it does not account for all the information within the entire QTF datastate. Therefore, when referring to the QTF datastate of the universe, it refers to only that part of the data within the QTF datastate that creates our universe within a virtual-like process. Another component of the QTF datastate is where the physics of consciousness exists. This component of the QTF datastate is not part of the QTF datastate of the universe, and it does not take part in the standard model of particle physics. The QTF datastate of the universe encompasses the information for the creation of all the elementary particles within the standard model of particle physics, prior to being processed within the physics of the standard model, that take part in creating all the matter, 3 of the 4 known fundamental forces of the universe, as well as the extra matter quantum particles that exist freely within the universe. The information for the creation of space and waves of electromagnetic radiation, of which neither has a quantum particle beginning, is each a part of the QTF datastate of the universe, but since neither has a quantum beginning, neither can function within the standard model of particle physics. Thus, the QTF datastate of the universe precedes the quantum particles within level of order that take part within the standard model of particle physics, so that the products of the merger between the QTF datastate of the universe and the physics of the standard model is what creates the quantum particles that we have identified in particle physics. As will be explained in the section, Reallusions, the property of vacant space and waves of electromagnetic radiation have no quantum beginning and are therefore reallusions within our reality. The most profound difference between the way that we each believe the universe exists as we go about our day-to-day lives, versus how the universe is proposed to exist within the Reallusion hypothesis, is that the Reallusion hypothesis proposes that all the particles within the standard model of particle physics, and therefore, matter, electromagnetic energy, and the 4 fundamental forces of nature, are each a virtual-like phenomenon. This means that the universe only has a physical expression within our perspective. Aside from this, the Reallusion hypothesis proposes that with the exceptions of the properties of space and waves of electromagnetic radiation, all the quantum particles that take part within the standard model of particle physics are no different in any other manner than how they are presently defined to be by the global scientific community, except it's all taking place within a virtual-like process. Therefore, the Reallusion hypothesis proposes that all the matter and the electromagnetic energy within the universe functions within the same system of physics as we have always believed, except that it only takes place within our conscious perspective. Thus, with the exception of the property of space and waves of electromagnetic radiation, the QTF datastate of the universe functions within the standard model of particle physics, and this is where our reality originates, except it originates from within a virtual-like process, rather than within a universe that is corporeal on its own, in the absence of our perspective. This has huge implications in the fundamental nature of time, space and matter, and how our reality and the universe are interconnected in ways that the scientific community has not yet come to identify, which is at the foundation of the measurement problem. The Reallusion hypothesis proposes that the QTF data state of the universe does not create consciousness, even though it possesses all the information to create the universe and each of our realities, as well as a process that allows our consciousness to control what our virtual selves do and perceive from within the QTF data state of the universe before it becomes part of our reality. The reason that the QTF data state of the universe does not create consciousness is that the standard model lacks a small component of the physics that are needed to create it. Thus, the Reallusion hypothesis proposes that consciousness is created within an ultra-small system of physics that is not part of the standard model. This other ultra-small system of physics has not yet been discovered by the general scientific community, because it involves the creation of consciousness, rather than the creation of the universe. This means that it cannot be revealed in particle accelerator research, because it is not part of the quantum constituents of matter. Although the Reallusion hypothesis does not define the precise nature of this other system of physics, for ease of conceptualization, it is defined as another branch of the quantum level. The creation of consciousness. Before defining the particular processes and the stages of the Reallusion process that are involved in the creation of consciousness, the most fundamental nature of the relationship between our consciousness and the QTF data state of the universe needs to be defined, for the measurement problem rests on a lack of understanding of why, when certain characteristics about a quantum particle have been made possible to be known, it affects how the quantum particle behaves. This occurs irrespective if someone gains the knowledge or not. We experience reality from within our consciousness, but everything that we experience is occurring within the QTF data state of the universe, not out there, where we believe a corporeal universe exists, and that we function within. What we perceive to be out there within the universe only exists within our consciousness, and our consciousness uses the QTF data state of the universe as our reality. The universe and everything that we do and perceive is occurring within the QTF data state of the universe, a Planck scale interval of time before we do it and perceive it within our reality. But to say that something is occurring within the QTF data state of the universe is misleading, for nothing with an expression occurs within the embodiment of QTF data, for the QTF data state of the universe is just data. Therefore, when something is inferred to be occurring within the QTF data state of the universe, it is inferring that the event has been written within the embodiment of QTF data. Likewise, during a passage that makes a reference to a virtual observer, perceiving something or doing something within the QTF data state of the universe, or within the embodiment of QTF data, as is stated in the next paragraph, the inference does not intend that each of us, or the universe itself, has any physical form or substance within the QTF data state of the universe. In the absence of our reality, there is no virtual expression of us or of the universe, for everything reverts to QTF data. Thus, inferences of our virtual selves is being used for ease of conceptualization, and it refers solely to the QTF data state of what we do and perceive, rather than an expression of ourselves or of the universe. Since the universe exists within the embodiment of the QTF data state of the universe, the physics that are involved with creating our conscious perspective has to decode what our virtual selves do and perceive from within the embodiment of QTF data, and converts it into a conscious perspective. As consciousness decodes what our virtual selves perceive and do from within the QTF data state of the universe and integrates it into our simulated reality, consciousness also controls what our virtual selves will do within the QTF data state of the universe, by taking part in the physics that edits the QTF data state of our actions into the QTF data state of the universe, a Planck scale moment before it gets incorporated into our conscious perspective, and as part of our simulated reality. This all occurs within a system of physics called the animate spacetime continuum. Thus, in accordance with the Reallusion hypothesis, as we live within our realities, the standard model of particle physics, and all of the quantum particles that we have identified that create matter and electromagnetic energy, as well as the physics within all of the branches of science, are virtual, as they exist within the embodiment of the QTF data state of the universe, prior to creating the large-scale properties of our reality, for from within our conscious perspective. Thus, the universe is a virtual-like phenomenon. It is being defined as a virtual-like phenomenon because we have nothing better to make an analogy to. A profound aspect of our reality is that even though the QTF data state of our brains generate all the information that is needed for the creation of consciousness and for all that we perceive, consciousness is not created within our brains. Just as everything else within the QTF data state of the universe, the matter of our brains, and therefore, all the electrochemical processes that take place within it, function within the standard model of particle physics, rather than within the other branch of the quantum level of order that creates consciousness. But since our brains create all the information that we will ultimately consciously perceive, as well as all the information that is used to create conscious thought, self-awareness, creativity, and all other aspects of consciousness, it causes us to perceive that our consciousness exists within our brains, and that our brains and consciousness are one and the same thing. This creates the perspective that consciousness originates from within our heads, as we perceive our five senses to be gathering the information that is being simulated into our reality. This same effect permeates through all aspects of our reality, so that we perceive our own physical essence, and the physical essence of the universe, to be just as real as if each of us and the universe were corporeal. The first step in the creation of our reality is the processing of information within our virtual brains from within the QTF data state of the universe. This includes what our virtual five senses gather from within the QTF data state of ourselves, as part of the QTF data state of the universe, for which our brains process into an observance within the embodiment of QTF data. Aside from observation, the areas of our brains that are responsible for perspective, memories, personality, temperament, mood, cognitive abilities, imagination, along with the information needed to create all the other facets of who we are, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, and cognitively, are created within the matter of our virtual brains that function within the physics of the standard model. Thus, with the exception of only consciousness, everything else that makes each of us who we are is either contained within our DNA, or is a consequence of environmental factors, which together controls everything that makes each of us unique, and is a part of our physical essence as well as our psychological, emotional, cognitive, and all the other facets of what makes each of us unique, and that all function within the standard model of particle physics. Our brains are made of matter, and like everything else in the universe, with the exception of space, and waves of electromagnetic radiation. It functions within electromagnetic, chemical, molecular, and cellular processes that function within the physics within all the branches of science that create sequentially higher levels of order, which all have emerged from the quantum particles that interact together within the standard model of particle physics. Since the standard model of particle physics lacks a component of the physics that creates consciousness, consciousness cannot be created within the physics of the standard model. And therefore, consciousness cannot be created within the matter of our brains, even though our brains create all the information that is needed to create it and all that we perceive. Thus, the creation of our reality involves all the information that our virtual selves do and observe from within the QTF data state of the universe, along with brain activity that processes the information needed for the creation of consciousness and conscious perspective, and integrates it into the physics of the other branch of the quantum level, which converts the information into our simulated conscious reality. Before the information that is processed within the matter of our virtual brains within the embodiment of QTF data can be utilized within the other branch of the quantum level, it has to be converted into a different type of data called the electromagnetic quantum data state. This conversion process only occurs within the QTF data state of the brains of conscious beings. The electromagnetic quantum data state is processed within the branch of the quantum level that creates consciousness. It has no activity within the standard model of particle physics, just as the QTF data state of the universe has no activity within the other branch of the quantum level, unless it has been converted into the electromagnetic quantum data state, which only occurs within certain areas of the brains of a conscious being. Information is constantly being shared in both directions between our virtual brains within the QTF data state of the universe and the other branch of the quantum level of order via consciousness. One direction involves the information that is utilized in the creation of our simulated reality, as information that is processed within the QTF data state of our brains, gets converted into the electromagnetic quantum data state to be processed within the other branch of the quantum level, to form our simulated reality. This reveals how information from within the QTF data state is transferred into our consciousness as consciousness and conscious perspective is being created. The other direction that information is being shared is as consciousness takes part within the physics of the animate spacetime continuum. The physics within the animate spacetime continuum writes the QTF data state of the actions that we will do within the next Planck scale moment within our conscious reality by editing the QTF data state of the actions into the QTF data state of the universe. Everything that we perceive and do within our reality occurs within the QTF data state of the universe, a Planck scale interval of time before it becomes our simulated reality. Since we act with free will, our consciousness takes part in the animate spacetime continuum, as consciousness controls what we will do and perceive within the QTF data state of the universe, a Planck scale moment before it is perceived as our reality. A Planck scale moment of time has no definitive value, for it is an allegorical representation of an interval of time that is much too small to be measured by our present technology. In its inference, it is much closer to Planck time than it is to an interval of time that we can presently measure. A Planck scale moment of time could refer to many quadrillions of Planck times, or just a dozen Planck times, for even many quadrillions of Planck times are such a minuscule interval of time that for all practical purposes, it is just about as immeasurable as Planck time is. When it is said to be immeasurable, it means to not actually be able to create it, or to measure something occurring within the inferred interval of time, rather than just calculating what it is, mathematically. The information within all other brain functions from within the QTF data state of the universe that are not involved with conscious perspective and consciousness itself do not get converted into the electromagnetic quantum data state. This QTF information remains within the embodiment of the QTF data state of the universe, along with the information within the QTF data state of our physical essence and the QTF data state of the rest of the universe. The conversion of the QTF data state into the electromagnetic quantum data state only occurs within the QTF data state of the brains of conscious beings. The conversion process involves the addition of a tiny amount of QTF data that is only created within certain areas of the brains of conscious beings from within the QTF data state of the universe. It is not found anywhere else in the universe, or within any other process within the QTF data state of the universe. The addition of this tiny amount of QTF data converts the QTF data state of the universe into the electromagnetic quantum data state, which causes the information within the electromagnetic quantum data state to be processed within the other branch of the quantum level, where it is decoded and utilized to create our consciousness and all that we perceive within it. As a consequence, virtual observations and virtual behaviors that originated within our virtual brains from within the QTF data state of the universe becomes a conscious perspective as consciousness is being created within each cycle of the Reallusion process. The product of this entire process is what we perceive as our realities. Precisely what information is contained in the small amount of QTF data that converts the QTF data state into the electromagnetic quantum data state is unknown. It may create a specific electromagnetic property that is not present in the QTF data state of the universe, or it may be of some other property that has not yet been identified. The conversion process takes place within the QTF data state of our brains, but since it occurs prior to the creation of our consciousness and all that we perceive, it is not part of our brain's activity from within our reality, and it is hidden to researchers as they try to understand how consciousness is created. To fully grasp why the conversion of the QTF data state into the electromagnetic quantum data state does not occur within the matter of our brains within our reality, it is necessary to understand the difference between our brains from within the QTF data state versus our brains within our reality. At the most fundamental level, our realities are created from the QTF data state of observations that are virtual selves gathered from within the QTF data state of the universe, along with the QTF data state of information that was created within processes that had taken place within other areas of our brains from within the QTF data state of the universe that was needed for the creation of consciousness. But this all takes place prior to the formation of the electromagnetic quantum data state, and prior to the formation of our reality. The collective sum total of all this information within the QTF data state of our brains gets merged with a tiny amount of QTF data, which creates the electromagnetic quantum data state. The addition of the small amount of QTF data takes place within the QTF data state of our brains. Thus, the merger is a process that occurs within the QTF data state of our brains, prior to the creation of the electromagnetic quantum data state, and prior to the creation of our reality. Therefore, the conversion process does not occur within our brains from within our realities. Thus, the conversion process is hidden to researchers as they try to understand how consciousness is created within our brains. Once the electromagnetic quantum data state of a perspective gets processed within the other branch of the quantum level, to create our realities, the physics of the standard model gets integrated into all that we perceive, as the QTF data state of the quantum particles that were part of the QTF data state of all the perspectives that we perceive, function within the standard model of particle physics. This corresponds to reallusions, as well as to that which we are directly interacting with. Thus, the reallusion process reveals that our minds exist within our brains, which is part of a virtual-like process within the QTF data state of the universe, while our consciousness is created separate from our minds. Reallusions. A conscious perspective can be one of two types. Both types take part in forming the landscape of our reality within each present moment. One type is when the matter of whatever the observation is of becomes simulated with a quantum beginning within an observer's conscious perspective, which causes it to function within all the physics of the universe, resulting in it being perceived to be corporeal within an observer's reality. The matter, and all properties associated with it, only exist within the observer's perspective. It does not exist outside of the observer's perspective. Only that, which a virtual observer directly interacts with, by using one or more of their five senses within the QTF data state of the universe, will be simulated with a quantum beginning within the observer's simulated reality. When it comes to the large-scale property of matter being simulated rather than photons, for example, the direct interaction between the observer and the matter of something usually involves directly touching and feeling the matter. Because the virtual observer within the QTF data state gained knowledge about how the object feels, and how it behaves within its environment, and within the physics of the universe at the large-scale level, the molecules of the matter that were directly interacted with within the QTF data state of the universe, will have a quantum particle beginning within the observer's conscious perspective. This results in those molecules to function within the physics up to the level of order that the observation was created in, which is the large-scale level with regard to matter, which includes the physics within all the branches of science. This process, along with the reallusion of the rest of the object's matter that the observer did not directly interact with, causes the entire object to function and feel as being corporeal within the observer's perspective. The depth of detail pertaining to the perspective that an object is corporeal is limited to the amount and type of information that was gathered by our five senses within the QTF data state of the universe. As we directly interact with the matter of an object itself, we feel how the object behaves and functions within its environment as a function of weight, temperature, density, motion, momentum, inertia, tactile properties, and how the object interacts with other matter. The more information that we gather about an object will add to how corporeal the object will function within our reality. The other type of perspective contains a reallusion within it. The vast majority of the landscape within our reality does not involve one or more of our five senses directly interacting with its matter within the QTF data state of the universe. For example, most of what we perceive within our reality was created by an observation within the QTF data state of the universe that involved one or more of our five senses interacting with either visible light, small particles of matter within the air, or some other type of stimulus that was either created by the object or was reflected off it, of which one or more of our five senses directly interacted with from within the QTF data state of the universe. From there, our virtual brain within the QTF data state of the universe converted the information that was gathered by our virtual five senses into an observation that exists within the embodiment of the QTF data state of the universe. Under these circumstances, the observation does not entail gaining the knowledge about how the matter of the object that the stimulus came from, felt, and behaved within its surroundings as it functioned within the physics of the universe. Therefore, as the information of the observation within our virtual brains, from within the QTF datastate of the universe, gets converted into the electromagnetic quantum datastate, the observation will be simulated into our consciousness to become part of our reality, and we will believe that it is corporeal, because we are not directly interacting with it. The object is part of the perspective that takes part in forming the landscape of our reality within that moment, but the matter of the object within the perspective is not being simulated into our reality. This is because the virtual observer from within the QTF datastate of the universe did not directly interact with the object, and therefore the object's matter does not need to be simulated within the observer's reality. It will be a conscious perspective, analogous to, but not the same as a hologram, with no corporeal attributes. The object within this type of perspective is called a reallusion, because its matter is not being simulated within our reality as we perceive it to be out there. To the contrary, any stimuli that was gathered by our five senses that was utilized to create the observation within our brains within the QTF datastate of the universe was directly interacted with, and thus, the stimuli will be simulated with a quantum beginning, and as being corporeal within our reality. Any component of the landscape within our reality that we perceive, but we are not directly interacting with its matter, is a reallusion. Thus, reallusions form the vast majority of the landscape within each moment of our reality. Since reallusions are part of the QTF datastate of the universe, they function within the physics of all the branches of science, but their matter is not what we perceive when we perceive them. Reallusions save a lot of brain power and energy, allowing our reality to be as efficient as possible. Without reallusions comprising the vast majority of our reality, our brains would need to be much larger and much more powerful. For example, as we look at, listen to, smell, taste and feel the landscape of each moment of our reality, we are only physically touching, and therefore, only directly interacting with an extremely small percent of the matter of the objects that are making up the landscape within our reality. The vast majority of the matter that we perceive is in response to light that interacts with our eyes, rather than directly interacting with the matter of the objects themselves. Thus, the matter of all the objects that we see with our eyes, and that make up the vast majority of the landscape within each moment of our reality, is not being simulated into the landscape of our reality within that moment, for they are reallusions. We think that it is their physical expression created by their matter that is causing us to perceive them. But it is only light, or perhaps some other form of electromagnetic radiation, or molecules of matter within the air, that we perceive as the sense of smell, taste, sound, or temperature that emanated from the object within the QTF datastate of the universe, and that was processed within the QTF datastate of our brains, and leads to the creation of an observation within our brains within the QTF datastate of the universe. We perceive a perspective of the object as it exists within our reality, without a quantum beginning, that in concept only, can be compared to a hologram, and thus, the object is a reallusion within our reality. If the universe were truly corporeal and truly out there, nothing would be a reallusion, and everything that we perceive would be corporeal, and made from quantum particles, atoms and molecules. But since the universe exists within the embodiment of the QTF datastate of the universe, our consciousness has to create the expression everything that we perceive. Therefore, it's a lot more efficient for our consciousness to create a reallusion than it is to create the matter of all the objects that form the landscape of our reality. Consider how much energy is being saved by creating a universe that only gets expressed within the landscape of a conscious being's reality, rather than the entire universe being corporeal on its own, in the absence of an observer's perspective. Although we all share the same QTF datastate of the universe, we each have our own separate realities that function independent to one another. For example, something that is corporeal and made of matter within one person's reality can be a reallusion within the reality of another person. Also, only the atoms and molecules of the matter of something that we directly interact with will be simulated with a quantum beginning, while the rest of its matter is a reallusion. Since a complete cycle of the reallusion process takes less than a trillionth of 1/4 of a second, the QTF datastate of ourselves including our brain from within the QTF data state, our body, and everything within the entire landscape of an observation from within our virtual brains from within the QTF data state of the universe, oscillates back and forth, with our conscious perspective of it, more than 1,000,000,000,000 quadrillion times per second. Since we only perceive what is expressed within our simulated reality, and our simulated reality is created at a rate of trillions of quadrillions of individual static frames per second, it is impossible for us to perceive or to be able to detect that our reality is created with the QTF data state of the universe, being interposed between each static frame of our reality. For something to be simulated within our reality, it has to be able to directly interact with one or more of our five senses, and to have been processed into an observation within the QTF data state of our brains, as if the event had initially occurred within our conscious reality. To be able to do this, it has to have a quantum beginning within the QTF data state of the universe. But the property of empty space functions differently than matter, as space is perceived within our reality. For example, it is proposed within the Reallusion hypothesis that the property of empty space has no quantum beginning within the QTF data state of the universe, and therefore, we cannot directly interact with space by using any one of our five senses. Thus, space, all on its own, has no quantum beginning within the standard model of particle physics. But it's obvious that we perceive empty space, as well as the three dimensions of space that matter takes up, even though space has no quantum beginning, and does not function within the standard model of particle physics. The reason why empty space exists within our reality, and that we can perceive it, is a function of space being coded to have a three-dimensional physical expression within the QTF data state of the universe, after it is perceived within the temporal perspective of conscious beings. Space has no quantum beginning as it is coded to exist in this manner from within the QTF data state of the universe, and therefore, space has no quantum particle beginning within the standard model of particle physics. As a virtual observer's body moves within empty space, within the QTF data state of the universe, the motion of their body is something that they can feel, and thus, observe within the embodiment of the QTF data state of the universe. The virtual observance gets converted into a conscious perspective within an observer's simulated reality. As a virtual observer observes space between multiple objects, the observance is created by their ability to see photoluminescence in the space, as well as from some other observations that may have been observed, such as sounds and the movement of air, as two examples that were occurring within the space from within the QTF data state of the universe. When the lights go out, we can't observe the vacancy of space, unless we move within it. As with the reallusion of the matter of an object that we perceive, but we are not directly interacting with, space is perceived within our reality as a function of how it was observed by our virtual selves, within the QTF data state of the universe, where space is coded to have an expression, even though it has no quantum beginning, and the virtual observer did not directly interact with it. Unlike the matter of an object that is a reallusion, until we directly interact with it, space has no quantum beginning to interact with, which would cause it to feel corporeal within our perspective as we move within it. This reveals that space is kind of like being virtual, from within our virtual-like reality. Space reacts to the mass of matter, and to matter in motion, as defined in general and special relativity, but Einstein derived special and general relativity from observing how matter behaves in space, and how matter behaves during extreme speeds of motion. From there, he postulated that gravity is an expression of how space causes matter to move, as a function of how matter causes space to contract and time to dilate. Thus, special and general relativity explain how matter and space interact with one another at the large-scale level, but there is no explanation of the mechanism within space that causes it to contract, or even what space is. This is because space has no quantum beginning within the standard model of particle physics, and therefore, the fundamental building blocks of space are either not quantum, or function within a different system of quantum physics than the standard model. Therefore, without a quantum particle beginning that is defined within the standard model of particle physics, the existence of space, along with the ability of space to move mass as it contracts, results in space behaving like a virtual phenomenon from within our reality. Thus, space is always a reallusion. Because space is a reallusion, gravity is also a reallusion. It's likely that there is a system of physics that defines exactly what space is, as well as the interactions between matter and space that causes space to contract in the presence of an increase in mass, and what is occurring within space while it is contracting. The answers to these questions are likely to be found within a system of physics that is part of the QTF data state of the universe, but is not part of the standard model, and may not have a quantum beginning. As we perceive an object that we are directly interacting with, the object will behave within all the physics of the universe. The molecules that we are directly touching are corporeal within our perspective, but the rest of the object that we are not touching, and that is a reallusion within our reality, continues to function within all the physics of the universe as we are perceiving the object, even though almost all its matter is not what is causing our perspective of it. Within the QTF data state of the universe, the rest of the matter of the object, that is a reallusion within our reality, is in connection with the tiny portion of the object's matter that we are directly interacting with, and that is being simulated within our reality. Our virtual selves and the matter of the entire object exist within the QTF data state of the universe, so that the entire object is functioning within the physics of all the branches of science from within the QTF data state of the universe. This results in the rest of the object's matter that we are not directly interacting with, and that is a reallusion, being passively integrated into our reality to be perceived as corporeal, as we are directly interacting with just a tiny portion of it. Thus, the entire object's weight, inertia, momentum, as well as how its connection to the matter of other objects affects how it feels and behaves, will become part of the observer's conscious perspective. To this effect, the reallusion of the rest of the object's matter will feel just as corporeal to the observer as the matter that he or she is directly interacting with. This is an example of the physics of a large-scale event. For large-scale events merge the reallusion of the matter of an entire object with the tiny portion of the matter that an observer is directly interacting with within the observer's perspective, so that the observer does not perceive that the much larger portion of the object's matter that they are not directly interacting with is not being simulated into their reality. Another example of a reallusion is the moon and stars in the night sky. Even though it's not the matter of the moon and the stars that causes an observer to perceive them being out there in the night sky, they are functioning within all the physics of the universe as we perceive them, because they exist within the QTF data state of the universe, with the rest of the universe. Thus, with the exception of space and waves of electromagnetic radiation, which are always a reallusion, all other reallusions function within the standard model of particle physics, and within the physics of all the branches of science, as they are passively integrated into our reality, from within the QTF data state, as a reallusion. The book, The Four States of Reality, gives an explanation as proposed by the two spectrums of energy hypothesis, for how it is that the space between us and the moon is not being simulated within our reality, but as an astronaut travels to the moon, the spaceship, and the people within it, experience all the space between the Earth and the moon. Although the answer to that question involves much more than what will be explained in this answer, simply stated. All of the space between the moon and the Earth does not get simulated in either the astronaut's reality, or our reality here on Earth, within any single moment. But since the spaceship is moving, the space that locally surrounds the spaceship, and that holds the spaceship's gravity within it, is part of the physical essence of the spaceship and the astronauts within the QTF data state. This is called the spaceship's system of matter, and is part of the two spectrums of energy hypothesis. As the spaceship moves towards the moon during each trillionth of a quadrillionth of a second, the spaceship's system of matter, which includes the spaceship and the space around it that embodies the spatial component of the spaceship's gravity, serves as an infinitesimal portion of all the vacant space that exists between the Earth and the moon at that infinitesimal interval of time. As the spaceship continues to move towards the moon, the space within the spaceship's system of matter will have created the total distance of the space between the moon and the Earth. When the instruments on the spaceship sends a signal to the moon that bounces off the moon to measure the distance between the moon and the spaceship, the measurement takes place within the QTF data state of the event, where the total volume of space between the moon and the spaceship exists within the embodiment of QTF data. The measurement itself is a reallusion, since a conscious being could not perceive it with one of their five senses, although the taking of the measurement is not. The two spectrums of energy hypothesis is a subdivision of the Reallusion hypothesis. It is a large component of what is covered in the book, The Four States of Reality. As proposed by the two spectrums of energy hypothesis, the property of three-dimensional space within our reality is created by our perspective of the passing of time. In the absence of our perspective of time passage, space within the QTF data state of the universe is coded to be two-dimensional within each static Planck scale moment of time. This not only includes vacant space, it also includes the space that matter occupies. As we perceive the passing of time within our stream of consciousness, it creates the third spatial dimension of space and matter, from what is initially two-dimensional within each static moment of time. Therefore, besides space being a reallusion that is coded within the QTF data state of the universe, to ultimately be perceived as having three dimensions within the reality of conscious beings, the three-dimensional property of vacant space as well as the matter that occupies it, is a function of the passage of time being perceived within our stream of consciousness. A detailed explanation of this is defined in the book. Another type of reallusion is the electromagnetic wave and the quantum wave function. Contrary to how the greater scientific community believes that an electromagnetic wave exists as a physical distribution of electric and magnetic energy within the universe that moves through space and time at the speed of light, the Reallusion hypothesis proposes that an electromagnetic wave is always a reallusion, but unlike space, it is never simulated within our reality. It exists solely within the embodiment of QTF data, as does the quantum wave function. Its function as a reallusion exists within the effects that it has on the distribution of the energy of many photons that interacts with matter, our eyes, or with our other five senses. The quantum wave function, however, has always been considered to be a mathematical probability function that has no physical expression. In this effect, it is analogous to a reallusion. When an electromagnetic wave contacts an atom within the QTF data state of the universe, the electromagnetic wave and the quantum wave function collapses into a point particle within a location that is consistent with Schrödinger's equation, and its wave may have interacted with itself many times during its path of propagation. This occurs naturally throughout the QTF data state of the universe within every location in the universe, irrespective if the event is being observed or not. But, when the event is observed, it will always be observed just as the photon's energy exists as a point particle, and after the electromagnetic wave and the quantum wave function have collapsed within the QTF data state of the universe. The photon will directly interact with one of the observer's eyes, or perhaps with one of the observer's four other virtual senses within the QTF data state, so that its energy as a point particle becomes part of the observer's simulated reality. The electromagnetic wave has no quantum beginning, so that it cannot interact with any of our virtual five senses within the QTF data state of the universe, and is therefore always a reallusion. Although the electromagnetic wave is a reallusion that does not have a physical expression within our reality, the effect that it has on the distribution of photons has a profound effect on the way that we perceive light within our reality, as it is what creates the wave-like property of light. The propagation of electromagnetic radiation through space and time is a reallusion, for even the photon, as well as its electromagnetic wave, only exist within the embodiment of QTF data, without any energy associated with it, as it is conceptualized to propagate through space and time. The photon's energy will exist as a point particle, as the electromagnetic wave contacts an atom within the QTF data state of the universe, and it is only then that the photon's energy will be coded to exist within a specific location in both space and time, within our reality. This allows the photon's energy to be absorbed into an electron with an atom that exists within a specific location in time and space, within our reality. This can be a piece of space dust anywhere within the QTF data state of the universe, or an atom within the eye of an observer. The photon's energy being expressed as a point particle, when its electromagnetic wave contacts some form of matter, occurs within every location within the universe within the embodiment of QTF data, irrespective if the event is perceived or not. Therefore, an observer's observation does not cause the wave function to collapse. Before a photon wave complex contacts an atom, and the photon's energy in the form of a point particle raises the energy level within an electron in the atom for a Planck interval of time. There never was an electromagnetic wave, or a photon, that propagated through space, even within the QTF data state of the universe. The propagation of the photon's energy within the embodiment of an electromagnetic wave does not actually take place within the QTF data state, except as the processing of where it will be during each sequential interval of Planck time within the reality of conscious beings, when it contacts some form of matter at a specific location in space and time. This information within the QTF data state of the universe is impossible for any conscious being to perceive, and therefore, it is not coded to actually occur within the QTF data state, except when the wave-photon complex contacts matter within the QTF data state of the universe. Since the universe was created to be perceived by conscious beings, anything that is impossible for a conscious being to perceive or to know, as it exists within a large-scale event, will not occur within the QTF data state of the universe. This is relevant in the measurement problem, for why the which path knowledge must exist in some form, that it is possible for an observer to know, in order for the photon's wave function to have been collapsed, before the photon ends its journey at a detector, or a detection screen. As will be explained a little later in the essay, when the which path of a photon has been created in such a way that a conscious observer could know it, the which path knowledge that is created within the event circumvents the usual and customary way that we gain knowledge from the universe. This is one of the reasons that the photon will behave differently from its usual behavior when we create the which path information in the double slit and the delayed choice quantum eraser experiments in such a way that it can be passed on to an observer. The animate spacetime continuum. In accordance with the Reallusion hypothesis, the system of physics that controls how the QTF data state of the universe and our consciousness interact together in the creation of our reality is called the animate spacetime continuum. To find scientific evidence that there is communication between our consciousness and the QTF data state of the universe will be difficult, because neither the QTF data state nor consciousness can be explored from within the standard model of particle physics, or within the laws of physics that define all the branches of science that electromagnetic energy and matter functions within, which defines our reality. This is because all the processes that take place within the animate spacetime continuum, and that are responsible for the creation of our reality, occur at a level of order that precedes our consciousness reaching the level of our awareness, and prior to matter and electromagnetic energy existing within the electromagnetic quantum data state. Thus, the physics within the animate spacetime continuum are not approachable from inside our reality, for it takes place within a level of order that exists prior to the creation of our stream of consciousness, within each cycle of the Reallusion process. Therefore, to find definitive evidence that the universe is only corporeal within our minds, physicists will have to think far outside the box, to come up with some way to uncover the physics that take place beyond the boundaries of our reality, and that are responsible for its creation. To fully understand the function of the animate spacetime continuum, it is necessary to realize that our present understanding of the factors that are involved in cause and effect, with regard to quantum particles, includes only half of the physics that are involved in how a quantum particle will behave as an effect of something. For example, in our day-to-day lives as we function on the large-scale level and interact with objects that are made of many atoms, and with electromagnetic energy that involves many photons simultaneously being perceived, cause and effect is a function of either what we do within the universe, or what spontaneously happens within the universe during each present moment, which then causes an effect within the universe. But when we interact with the universe on the quantum level, what is possible for an observer to know about a quantum particle can have a more profound effect on how the particle will behave than what the observer has done to it. For example, in the double-slit experiment, when a photon's which path has been detected, if the knowledge that was gained in the detection does not exist in a manner that is possible for someone to know, the photon's behavior will not change from its normal behavior within the rest of the experiment, even though the which path has successfully been done. The double slit and the delayed choice experiments reveal that the universe knows what is possible for us to know about the which path detection, and the particle's behavior will change only if the which path knowledge is possible for someone to know it. Thus, within the quantum level, what is possible for us to know about a quantum particle will have a more profound effect on its behavior than what we do to it, which reveals that our minds and the universe are profoundly interconnected. The measurement problem in quantum mechanics is a function of this relationship, and because the general scientific community has not yet come to understand the relationship between the universe and our consciousness, it has resulted in the measurement problem remaining to be a conundrum for so many years. Therefore, the animate spacetime continuum is a system of physics that bridges the gap between the QTF data state of the universe and our consciousness and passes information between them in both directions. Aside from other functions that the animate spacetime continuum performs during the creation of our reality, as will be explained in this section, the physics within the animate spacetime continuum are also responsible for causing the photon to function like a point particle, rather than functioning as a wave of electromagnetic energy, from the time that its Witch path was detected, until it reaches a detector at the end of the experiment, as long as it was possible for an observer to know the Witch path knowledge. The explanation of how and why the animate spacetime continuum changes the photon's behavior after its Witch path has been detected will be explained in a preceding chapter. It should also be understood that the definition of an observer in this circumstance embodies any observer within the universe, irrespective if they are involved with the experiment or not, and the observer does not need to be aware that they have gained the knowledge, or of what it means. Since we act with free will, our consciousness is in control of what we do within our reality, even though everything happens within the QTF data state of the universe before it happens within our reality. The manner in which consciousness controls what we do within each next moment of our reality is mediated by a combination of the following. What we had just done within the past Planck scale moment within our simulated reality. How the continuation or any change of an action must always occur within the laws of physics of all the branches of science. And the manner in which consciousness is created within different stages involving different levels of order, starting within the QTF data state of our brains, all the way up to the large-scale level as perceived from within our stream of consciousness. In order for us to be able to act with free will, within a universe, where everything must occur within the QTF data state before it happens in our reality, all the levels of order that are utilized in creating consciousness are being utilized in the physics that allow us to act with free will, for a reality is initiated from within the quantum level of order, where consciousness has not yet become an awareness, within the large-scale properties of the time and space of our reality. At the most fundamental level in the creation of consciousness, consciousness functions more like a computer program within a quantum computer from the future, rather than how it functions as our large-scale, temporal awareness from within the level of our reality. In this elementary level of order, consciousness functions within Planck scale intervals of time, allowing it to take part in the physics of the animate spacetime continuum, and to have control of what actions get edited into the QTF data state of the universe, before consciousness becomes simulated as our reality, and before it has progressed to the large-scale level of our stream of consciousness. Thus, the physics of the animate spacetime continuum allows us to act with free will, from within a universe where everything that we do must occur within the QTF data state of the universe, before we do it, and before we perceive it from within our reality. When the double slit and the delayed choice quantum eraser experiments are performed, it is an action that is being done by conscious beings. Everything that occurs within every Planck scale moment, and every Planck scale volume of space that is involved with each experiment, is edited into the QTF data state of the universe by the physics within the animate spacetime continuum. Therefore, the QTF data state of the universe knows where and when the experiment is being done, and what has been accomplished within it, just like any other action that we do during our day-to-day realities. Thus, the information concerning if and how a photon's Witch path was detected, and if the knowledge of the detection is possible for an observer to know, is included in what was edited into the QTF data state of the universe by the animate spacetime continuum, and the QTF data state can react to it as it was created to do. Since the QTF data state of the universe exists within the embodiment of QTF data, rather than within the properties of space, matter, energy, and time, everything that we do and cause to happen within our reality can be shared throughout the entire universe, instantaneously. It's within the interconnection that exists between our brains within the QTF data state of the universe, and the most fundamental level of our consciousness from within the branch of the quantum level that creates it, that the actions that we do are created within the embodiment of QTF data and edited into the QTF data state of the universe, a Planck scale moment before it becomes part of our reality. This system of physics is not part of the standard model, so that it is not observable from within our reality. The interval of time from when an action is coded to take place within a QTF data state to when it occurs within an observer's reality is much less than 1/1,000,000,000 of a quadrillionth of a second. The animate spacetime continuum utilizes the QTF data state of the universe as a QTF data blueprint for the universe and for a reality, for everything that we do and everything that we perceive occurs within the QTF data state of the universe, a Planck scale moment before it becomes our reality. The following processes take part in the creation of our reality and utilize the physics within the animate spacetime continuum. Number 1. The QTF data state of a virtual observer's 5 virtual senses interact with a stimulus from an event that is taking place within the QTF data state of the universe, a Planck scale interval of time before the perspective is perceived within the observer's reality. This is a completely virtual process, where nothing has any physical expression, for it all occurs within the embodiment of the QTF data state of the universe. Thus, the event doesn't actually take place in any physical way, prior to being decoded into a conscious perspective. But even then, the corporeal property of what we perceive is only corporeal within our perspective. This part of our reality is being created from an observance, rather than an action that we do. An observance involves the gathering of the information of an event that was naturally occurring within the QTF data state of the universe by using an observer's virtual 5 senses, and then processing that information within the QTF data state of the observer's virtual brain. The QTF data state of the event that is being observed does not require any editing of the QTF data state of the universe by the animate spacetime continuum, for it is occurring naturally and spontaneously as a function of the physics of the universe, irrespective if an observer observes the event or not. The event, however, needs to be edited into our conscious perspective by being converted into the electromagnetic quantum data state, so that it can be processed within the other branch of the quantum level to create the observer's simulated reality. If the observance was affected by an action that another observer had done, or by what the observer themselves had done, or is doing, the QTF data state of the universe utilizes the physics within all the branches of science to alter the universe in the present and in the future to accommodate for the observer's actions. The QTF data state of the universe and an observer's conscious perspective of it function within 2 separate systems of data as they interact together to create our reality. Number 2. Simultaneously as the above occurs, the QTF data state of an observer's actions that they will do within the next Planck scale moment of their reality are being edited into the QTF data state of the universe by the physics of the animate spacetime continuum. That which an observer has just done within their reality influences what they will do within the next Planck scale moment of their virtual selves within the QTF data state. This is because as our conscious reality functions within intervals of time that are at minimal, 1/100th of a second, the animate spacetime continuum functions in intervals of time that are much less than 1/1,000,000,000th of a quadrillionth of a second. Thus, the vast majority of our ability to act with free will does not involve our large-scale conscious awareness, for the physics of the universe and the physics within the animate spacetime continuum control the vast majority of the actions that we do. For many trillions of quadrillions of static frames of an observer's reality is being processed within the physics of the animate spacetime continuum during each 1/100th of a second within the observer's stream of consciousness. Thus, although our conscious awareness takes part in what we do within our reality, most of the physics that create what we do as we act with free will occur within a much lower level of consciousness than conscious awareness. These lower, more elementary levels of consciousness function within intervals of time that are more similar to the speed of a quantum computer of the future than the speed for which we are able to consciously act. When a conscious or a subconscious change of an action that is already in progress is to be initiated, or if a new action is to be initiated, all levels of consciousness are involved in creating the QTF data state of the change. This is a completely virtual process, that occurs within an interrelationship that exists between the QTF data state of the universe and our consciousness from within the other branch of the quantum level, and occurs trillions of quadrillions of times within one perceived second of our large-scale conscious awareness. The creation of the large-scale properties of time, space, and matter within our reality requires many trillions of quadrillions of sequential cycles of the Reallusion process and the physics of all the branches of science to create just one perceivable second of our large-scale conscious awareness. Number 3. Electrochemical processes from within the cellular, molecular, and atomic levels within certain areas of an observer's brain, from within the QTF data state of the universe, creates information that when processed within the physics of the quantum level of order, initiates the formation of consciousness. These higher brain functions are not the same processes that are involved with the creation of an observance or memory. Information between the QTF data state of our brains and the other branch of the quantum level of order is constantly being passed between them in both directions during our reality. Number 4. There's another phenomenon that utilizes the animate spacetime continuum as a channel to pass information between the QTF data state of the universe and consciousness. It has to do with consciousness being used in a way that allows for certain technologies to work, and possibly in the future, for human beings to be able to directly edit the QTF data state of the universe with our consciousness, and without the change being accomplished through an action that we do. Large-scale events. Because the universe within our reality is a virtual-like process, rather than of a truly corporeal nature, the universe shares information with us within the physics of large-scale events. The physics of large-scale events merge reallusions that have no quantum beginning within our simulated reality, with a perspective that is being simulated into our reality, with a quantum beginning, and that we are directly interacting with. In doing so, large-scale events integrate reallusions into our reality, as being perceived as corporeal. Although everything within our reality only exists within our minds, if our virtual selves from within the QTF data state directly interacted with matter of some kind, the molecules that form the matter that our virtual selves directly interacted with will be created from quantum particles within our conscious perspective, and will function within the physics of all the branches of science from within our reality. The foundation of our reality rests on knowledge, for nothing can happen within a large-scale event that is impossible for an observer to know, under any set of circumstances that an observer could be in, that is possible to occur within the physics of the universe. To the contrary, anything that is possible to be known by an observer, whether it takes place within a small-scale event or a large-scale event, can occur within the QTF data state of the universe. Large-scale events also are involved with how we perceive and interact with matter. As our virtual selves directly interact with a small portion of the matter of an object from within the QTF data state of the universe, we gain more knowledge about this part of the object than we did of the rest of the object's matter that we did not feel and touch. Only those atoms and molecules that we are directly interacting with will be simulated with a quantum beginning within our reality. The rest of the object's matter that we are not directly interacting with is a reallusion within our perspective of it, as its matter is not being simulated into our reality. How the rest of the object behaves and feels to us is a function of how the influence of gravity, inertia, motion, and other matter affects the entire object from within the QTF data state of the universe. Thus, our perspective includes how the entire object would feel if it were all being simulated within our reality, with a quantum beginning, as a function of the tiny portion of the object's matter that is being simulated with a quantum beginning, and that we are able to feel. The perspective is created within the physics of a large-scale event that integrates how the entire object would behave and feel to us if all its matter were being simulated. Large-scale events allow our reality to be created as efficiently as possible by integrating reallusions into our perspective with a part of the matter of something that we are directly interacting with. Another example of a large-scale event is how we perceive light. In accordance with the Reallusion hypothesis, waves of electromagnetic radiation are always a reallusion, for they don't have a quantum beginning, which means that they are not able to directly interact with one of our 5 senses within the QTF data state of the universe. Unlike space, waves of electromagnetic radiation do not have to be simulated within our reality in order to cause the same effect that they would if they were simulated, and therefore, waves of electromagnetic radiation do not exist within our reality. To the contrary, the photon, which is the point-particle component of the wave-particle complex, from within the QTF data state of the universe, is what our virtual selves are directly interacting with from within the QTF data state of the event, when our virtual eyes interact with visible light, or one of our other senses interacts with photons that are associated with another wavelength of electromagnetic radiation. Light and other frequencies of electromagnetic radiation behave within our reality as if they are waves, rather than individual photons. This is because the physics within a large-scale event integrates the wave property of a photon's energy, which is always a reallusion, and only exists within the embodiment of QTF data, into our reality, as light interacts with all the objects that form the landscape of our reality, before interacting with our eyes within the QTF data state of an event. The electromagnetic wave is always a reallusion, while the photon, being the point-particle component of the wave-photon complex, is what interacts with our eyes and with other objects that our virtual selves observe within the QTF data state of the universe. The physics within a large-scale event merges the reallusion of the electromagnetic wave and the quantum wave function with the point-particle expression of the photon's energy that we directly interact with. This results in visible light behaving as if it was created from waves, rather than from photon particles. This results in light being diffusely and evenly distributed within the landscape of our reality, creating the way that we perceive light. In accordance with the Reallusion hypothesis, during the time that we conceptualize that the energy of a photon is propagating through space and time as a wave of electromagnetic radiation, the photon's energy within the wave-photon complex only exists as the processing of data within the QTF data state of the universe that is not meant to ever be part of an observer's reality. The energy within the photon wave complex will not be coded to have an expression of the photon's energy until it either contacts matter within the QTF data state or becomes involved in some other phenomenon that causes decoherence. This is where and when a photon is generated within the QTF data state of the universe for only about a Planck time, as its energy is added to an electron within an atom. As many photons interact with the eyes of a virtual observer within the QTF data state of the universe, it will create a cascade of electrochemical reactions to occur within the virtual observer's eyes, their optic nerves, and eventually within their visual cortex of their brain within the QTF data state of the universe. Their collective sum total creates an observance within the QTF data state of the virtual observer's brain that will be converted into the electromagnetic quantum data state and become simulated within the observer's consciousness. The matter of what the observance is of will not have a quantum beginning since the observer did not directly interact with it, so that it is a reallusion. In accordance with the Reallusion hypothesis, the reason why light and other forms of electromagnetic radiation do not actually propagate through space and time at the speed of light is likely for efficiency. Since the universe was created for conscious beings to live their lives within, and no conscious being can perceive a photon's energy as it propagates through space, irrespective of what frequency the photon's energy may be in, the propagation of light, or any other wavelength of electromagnetic radiation, does not need to be simulated in any observer's reality. Therefore, it is much more efficient for the photon's energy to be created as a point particle within the QTF data state of the universe at the place and time that it could be observed, as if its electromagnetic wave-photon complex had actually propagated through space and time within our reality, until it contacted the atoms of matter that the photon got absorbed into. This is one example of why we perceive the universe within the physics of large-scale events, where reallusions get passively integrated into our reality, without their matter being simulated. It should be noted that the photon itself is not what gets simulated within our reality, but rather, it's the effect that it has in our virtual eyes, our optic nerve, and on the visual cortex within the QTF data state of ourselves, and of that which the light was emanating from within the QTF data state of the universe. This is because the photon's energy only exists as a point particle for a Planck time, as it raises the energy within an electron in the atom that it contacted. Once it is expelled from the electron, and the atom a Planck time after being absorbed into it, its energy exists within the embodiment of an electromagnetic wave and a quantum wave function, which is never simulated into our reality, and only exist within the embodiment of QTF data, during the period of time that it is being conceptualized to be propagating through space and time, within our reality. Just as a large-scale event causes the rest of the matter of an object that an observer did not directly interact with, to be perceived as being corporeal, as a function of the tiny component of the object's matter that the observer did directly interact with, a large-scale event causes a photon's electromagnetic wave, which is always a reallusion, and is never simulated into our reality, to cause light to behave like waves as we interact with the photon. In accordance with the Reallusion hypothesis, since an electromagnetic wave, and its quantum wave function, from within the QTF data state of the universe, collapses into a photon whenever it contacts any form of matter, irrespective whether or not an observer is present to observe the event, reveals that decoherence of the quantum wave function does not require an observation from a conscious observer or by a detector. It also reveals that quantum decoherence is occurring all the time within the QTF data state of the universe, whether or not an observer is present to observe it, or whether or not it is detected within an experiment. Thus, quantum decoherence has nothing to do with an observance, for it happens within the QTF data state of the universe, whenever the photon contacts any type of matter, irrespective if an observer is there to observe it or not. This allows the QTF data state of the universe to age and evolve in the absence of an observer, and keeps it in a constant state of readiness to be perceived. What has not yet been defined in this work is why it is that by creating the knowledge of a photon's Witch path, not only collapses the quantum wave function, it also allows the photon, or perhaps another photon that was created at the time and place that the Witch path could be known, to continue along its path of propagation as if it was a point particle that is not in association with an electromagnetic wave and a quantum wave function, as it contacts the detection screen, or a detector, at the end of its journey. This is an important part of the measurement problem conundrum, and will be defined in the next section. Large-scale events are coded to occur from their beginning to their finish at the time they were started, and they only have one possible ending. This is because the universe functions within all the branches of science, and as long as an observer acting with free will does not get involved, things that happen within the universe can be predicted with complete accuracy, down to the Planck scale of time and the Planck scale of space, for billions of years in advance, and to end in only one way. This is why the QTF data state of the universe contains the information of every event that will naturally occur in the universe via the physics within all the branches of science, through to the end of the lifespan of the universe, and why the future, the past, and the present all exist together simultaneously within the QTF data state of the universe, except for the actions of conscious beings, and how those actions will affect the universe after the action has been completed. During our day-to-day realities, we constantly interfere with large-scale events that are already in progress, and cause the event to be terminated prior to the way it was coded to end. But when the large-scale event is terminated, a small-scale event is not started where the large-scale event ended, but rather, a new large-scale event is often generated. This is because during our day-to-day realities, our actions occur within large-scale events, and the QTF data state of the universe interacts with us within the same level of order, within large-scale events. But, to the contrary, and as will be explained in the next section, when we detect a photon's Witch path in the double slit, and the delayed choice quantum eraser experiments, and if the Witch path knowledge exists in a way that an observer could know it, the existence of knowable knowledge concerning the photon's Witch path results in the photon that contacts the detector at the end of the experiment to function within the physics of a small-scale event before it contacts the detector. The Reallusion hypothesis proposes that it is because the general scientific community has not yet identified the physics that cause the photon to function within a small-scale event, along with what it reveals about the nature of our reality, is one of the reasons that the measurement problem has not yet been solved. Step-by-step explanation of the double-slit experiment, when a mechanical detector is used at the double slits, as proposed in the Reallusion hypothesis. This explanation of the double-slit experiment involves a single photon that is not entangled with another photon. To the contrary, the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment involves two entangled photons. The delayed choice quantum eraser experiment will be explained in its own section. When a mechanical detector is used at the double slits, it interacts with the photon, which results in decoherence of the photon's wave function, as well as creating a record of the Witch path knowledge that an observer can know. But, in accordance with the Reallusion hypothesis, and as will be explained, the collapse of the wave function, or even if another photon is created as an effect of the detection process, does not really matter, for the most profound event that is responsible for the measurement problem is that the Witch path knowledge was obtained by bypassing the physics of a large-scale event. This occurs as the detection process causes the photon's electromagnetic wave, and its quantum wave function, to collapse, and a new equivalent photon is created. Unlike what occurs within our day-to-day realities, the new photon continues on the original photon's exact path of propagation. As will be explained, this results in the new photon to no longer behave within a large-scale event within the rest of the experiment, which is described as behaving within a small-scale event. Both the double-slit and the delayed choice quantum eraser experiments reveals that the universe seems to know when the Witch path of a photon has been made possible for an observer to know, and as a result, the photon's behavior within our reality will be adjusted accordingly. Thus, the measurement problem raises the following questions. Number 1. How does the universe know that a photon's Witch path has been detected, and if the knowledge of the detection can be known, or if it cannot be known by an observer? Number 2. Why does the photon's behavior change when it is possible for an observer to know the photon's Witch path, even if no observer ever gains the knowledge? Number 3. How is a photon able to propagate from the location where its Witch path was detected to the end of its journey within the experiment without being in association with an electromagnetic wave and quantum wave function? Number 4. How does the universe know if the Witch path knowledge no longer exists in such a way that it can be known by an observer, if an observer destroys it or erases it before the photon reaches the end of its journey? In the classical way that the universe is thought to exist by the vast majority of the scientific community, the universe is corporeal, and it is truly out there as a corporeal presence. Thus, in this classical concept of the universe, the most basic process that is required for us to function within our reality is that the universe needs to be able to transfer information to us, while we need to be able to gather the information, and then process it within our brains, which creates our reality as an exact likeness of what was observed, as if our consciousness is directly at the other end of that which we perceive. In this classical approach, there is no need for the universe to know what we know, or what we are able to know, for there is no need for there to be an interconnection between the universe and our consciousness, other than what our 5 conscious senses gather. Because most scientists believe the universe exists in this classical way, is why the measurement problem of quantum mechanics has been a conundrum for so many years, as proposed by the Reallusion hypothesis. On the other hand, if the universe exists solely within the embodiment of QTF data, and it only has a corporeal expression within our reality, then the relationship between the universe and our consciousness would function entirely on the transfer of information between the QTF data state of the universe and our consciousness, since they are interconnected together at a fundamental level, so that information is constantly shared between them in both directions. For example, as proposed by the Reallusion hypothesis, we act with free will. Therefore, every action that an observer does needs to be edited into the QTF data state of the universe by the animate spacetime continuum, a Planck scale moment before we do it within our reality, and the effect that the action will have in the universe will have happened within the universe that we all share. The QTF data state of the universe is able to process the effects that the action will have in the universe for billions of years into the future, via the physics within all the branches of science, and then edits those changes into the QTF data state of the future of the universe at the time that the observer does the action. Because of this, the past, the present and the future all exist simultaneously within the QTF data state of the universe, with the exception of the actions that conscious beings will do in the future of our reality, and the effect that the action will have on the universe. Every event that will naturally occur within the entire lifespan of the universe, if not affected by the action of a conscious being, can be predicted by using the physics of the universe. It's possible that the QTF data state of the universe may include every event that will naturally occur within the universe for many billions of years into the future of our realities, so that time does not pass within the QTF data state of the universe. But since we act with free will, the universe cannot predict how a conscious being will act within the large-scale intervals of time that we function within. Thus, the QTF data state must constantly adjust the future, according to the actions that conscious beings do in each present moment of our reality. As this is being done, time passes from the now to the then, within our conscious perspective, but as we experience the motion of time, the past, the present, and the future within the QTF data state of the universe all exist together, simultaneously, with no motion of time occurring. Since the double slit and the delayed choice quantum eraser experiments are actions that are done by conscious beings, the animate spacetime continuum has edited the experiments into the QTF data state of the universe, so that it gets integrated into being part of the QTF data state. This is how the universe knows that the which path of a photon has been detected, and if the knowledge can be known by an observer. In the same manner, the universe will also know if an observer has destroyed or erased the which path knowledge before any observer gained the knowledge before the photon was detected at the end of its journey, for the action would have been edited into the QTF data state of the universe by the animate spacetime continuum. The universe was created for us to perceive, and it was created to react to what we can know, just as much as to what we do know. Since our actions are initially created within the embodiment of QTF data before we do them within our reality, it's likely that the universe responds to them as a function of the processing of data, rather than having any semblance of an awareness of how the data becomes our reality. The answer to why the universe changes the photon's behavior from within the physics of a large-scale event into the physics of a small-scale event irrespective if any observer gains the which path knowledge or not, requires a multifactorial explanation, as it involves multiple layers of quantum behaviors that do not occur within our day-to-day large-scale realities. The first thing that happens in the double-slit experiment with regard to the measurement problem of quantum mechanics is the which path detection itself. In accordance with the Reallusion hypothesis, the which path detection creates knowable knowledge, and the existence of knowable knowledge is what circumvents the physics of the large-scale event that the photon's energy functions within. The first thing to understand is that the physical act of detecting the photon's which path is not what circumvents the photon's large-scale event, because the photon wasn't actually detected while it was propagating through space and time within an electromagnetic wave, and the detection process itself functions within a large-scale event, just as all the actions that we do within our reality do. The reason that the which path detection results in the circumvention of the physics of the photon's large-scale event is a function of the manner that the photon's which path knowledge was caused to exist within the QTF data state of the universe, rather than the detection itself, and rather than the detection having been carried out successfully, but without its which path being knowable. This reveals that the measurement problem in quantum mechanics is about the which path knowledge that was made possible to be known, that under normal circumstances is impossible to be known. As will be explained, retrocausality is needed for the which path knowledge that was created within the detection process to exist within the QTF data state of the universe. Retrocausality does not occur within our day-to-day realities as we gain the knowledge about something that we perceive directly, or that we are able to know about within an indirect way, or as an event occurs within the universe that no one will ever know about, but it was not impossible for an observer to know under the right set of circumstances that are possible to occur. But, since retrocausality is fundamental in the physics that allows the which path knowledge to exist within the QTF data state of the universe, it is fundamental in causing the photon to function within a small-scale event, after its which path has been detected. As was explained prior, if something is possible to know, then that something can happen within, or exist within the universe. To the contrary, if something is impossible to know, then that something cannot happen, or exist in the universe. Therefore, if the which path knowledge exists in a manner that is possible for an observer to know, irrespective whether or not any observer has gained the knowledge, the which path knowledge will exist within the QTF data state of the universe. Before explaining why it is that the which path knowledge has to be known by an observer in order for the photon to be changed to a small-scale event, let's first understand what is meant by circumventing the physics of a large-scale event, and why retrocausality occurs in the double-slit experiment. The reason that the Witch path detection circumvents a large-scale event is because the Witch path knowledge that is created within it cannot exist within the QTF data state of the universe unless the Witch path knowledge is knowable. Although this is true for anything that can happen within the QTF data state of the universe, the Witch path knowledge is different because it cannot be known as we function within our day-to-day realities unless retrocausality occurs. Here is the explanation of why, how, and where retrocausality occurs in the double-slit experiment. In order for the photon's Witch path to be made knowable, it requires that another step to be taken after the detection of the Witch path has already occurred. It is necessary that the photon's Witch path be knowable in order for the Witch path knowledge to exist within the QTF data state of the universe. But in order for the Witch path knowledge to be knowable, it must have first occurred within the QTF data state of the universe. Therefore, since the Witch path knowledge cannot exist in the QTF data state of the universe unless the Witch path knowledge has been made knowable for an observer to know, and since making the Witch path knowledge knowable requires an extra step to occur after the Witch path knowledge has been created within the QTF data state of the universe, a paradox is created unless retrocausality occurs, which reverses cause and effect. This also reveals that in order for the Witch path knowledge to exist within the QTF data state of the universe, and for the photon's energy to be converted into a small-scale event, the Witch path knowledge does not have to be known by an observer, it just has to exist within the universe in a way that an observer could know it. For example, during our day-to-day lives, when we perceive photons of visible light, or when we utilize a photon's energy in some technology, the end result that was created from the photon's energy being utilized in either example can be known by an observer without retrocausality being utilized. This is because the knowledge of the photon's energy can be known by an observer from its start to its finish within the above processes, because the photon remains within a large-scale event throughout its lifespan. But, since the Witch path knowledge cannot be directly gained by an observer, and because it cannot be gained within the physics of a large-scale event, the Witch path knowledge requires retrocausality to take place in order for the Witch path knowledge to exist in the QTF data state of the universe, and for it to be able to be knowable. Because of this, the photon's energy will function within a small-scale event within the rest of the experiment. Many people think that the measurement problem is about detecting the photon's Witch path while it was propagating through space within a particle wave complex. But as will be explained, the photon's Witch path was not detected while the photon was propagating in space within a wave-photon complex. To understand this, let's examine the Witch path detection process step by step and why it results in a photon's Witch path being known, without the Witch path detection actually detecting the photon while it was propagating within a wave-photon complex. The photon's Witch path is detected immediately after the energy within the field created by the detector interacts with the photon's wave-photon complex and causes the wave-photon complex to collapse into a photon. The interaction between the electromagnetic field that was created by the detector and the photon's wave-photon complex is an event that takes place within the processing of data within the background of the QTF data state of the universe. It doesn't actually occur as an event that took place within our reality. Once the photon's wave complex collapses into a photon, this is when it gets detected within the QTF data state of the universe that corresponds to a point in space and time within our realities. Within a Planck time after the photon's energy is coded to exist as a point particle within a place and time within our realities, a new identical photon is created within a new photon wave complex from within the field created by the detector. The entire process lasts only about a Planck time, which is the same time that it would have taken the wave-photon complex to propagate through a Planck distance of space within the experiment if it had not been detected. Once the new photon's photon-wave complex is created within the embodiment of QTF data, it is processed within the background of the QTF data state of the universe to function within our realities to propagate within the same exact path of propagation that the original photon was on before it was detected. Since the identical wave-photon complex continues on the exact same path of propagation that the original photon was on, and no time was lost, as well as the second photon's energy remained exactly the same as the original original photon before it was detected, the detection process allows the initial photon's Witch path to be known, just as if the initial photon was detected while it was propagating through time and space within an electromagnetic wave and a quantum wave function. What happens next depends on the Witch path knowledge continuing to exist in such a way that an observer could know it until the photon contacts a detector or a detection screen at the end of the experiment. As long as the Witch path knowledge remains intact until the photon reaches the end of the experiment, its electromagnetic wave and quantum wave function will not have interacted with itself. It should be understood that the physics involved with the creation of the Witch path detection remained within a large-scale event. Nothing that was done in the experiment was done without functioning within a large-scale event. As explained prior, since the Witch path knowledge has to be knowable before the Witch path detection can exist within the QTF data state of the universe, and because making the Witch path knowledge knowable takes an additional step that can only occur after the Witch path knowledge has been created within the QTF data state of the universe, reveals retrocausality must occur within the experiment. This is why the creation of the Witch path knowledge that is knowable circumvents the physics of a large-scale event. This reveals that what we are able to know about something is as important as what we do know, because for something to happen within the QTF data state of the universe, it must be possible to be known, irrespective whether anyone ever knows it or not. So why is it necessary that the new identical photon change from functioning within a large-scale event to a small-scale event within the rest of the experiment, rather than to just continue to remain within a large-scale event throughout the rest of the experiment? The answer has to do with the fact that the universe will interact with us within the same system of physics that we directly interact with it. With regard to the double-slit experiment, the way that we directly interact with the photon within the QTF data state of the universe is within the Witch path detection process, which is what caused the Witch path knowledge. Since the knowledge within the Witch path detection has been caused to occur within the QTF data state of the universe, by making that knowledge knowable through retrocausality, the Witch path knowledge circumvented the physics of a large-scale event. Thus, since we interacted with the photon in a process that led to circumventing the physics of a large-scale event, the new identical photon's energy will not function within the physics of a large-scale event within the rest of the experiment, as long as the Witch path knowledge remains knowable until the photon contacts the detection screen, or a detector at the end of the experiment. If the Witch path knowledge did not exist in a way that could be known by any observer, it would be impossible for any observer to know about it, and the detection would not have happened within the QTF data state of the universe. In this case, the physical act of doing the detection would have occurred within the QTF data state of the universe, and within the realities of the observers that took part in the experiment, but no knowledge will have been created within the detection, since the knowledge could not have been known by any observer. Thus, the photon would remain within a large-scale event, and the photon's wave function will have interacted with itself before it ends its journey at the end of the experiment. If someone gains the knowledge before the photon reaches the end of the experiment, it doesn't matter if the Witch path knowledge is destroyed before the photon reaches the end of the experiment, because an observer had already gained it. This reveals that it's not the physical act of doing the experiment itself that has caused the photon to change its behavior after its Witch path was detected, but rather, it's about the knowledge that the detection process caused, being able to be known or not able to be known by an observer. What hasn't been explained yet is how the photon's energy gets changed from a large-scale event to a small-scale event when the photon's Witch path has been detected and made knowable. The conversion occurs within the physics of the animate spacetime continuum. The animate spacetime continuum is the intermediary system of physics between the QTF data state of the universe and an observer's consciousness. It converts the QTF data state of everything that is processed within our virtual brains from within the QTF data state of the universe that involves the creation of our consciousness and conscious perspective into the electromagnetic quantum data state. The animate spacetime continuum also writes the QTF data state of every action that we will do within our reality, and edits it into the QTF data state of the universe before it converts it into the electromagnetic quantum data state to be processed within the other branch of the quantum level. Since the animate spacetime continuum is involved with everything that we perceive, and will do from within our reality. The physics within it is what changes the photon's energy from functioning within the physics of a large-scale event into functioning within the physics of a small-scale event. The physics of the animate spacetime continuum is created from a merger of the standard model of particle physics, which arises within the QTF data state of the universe, with the physics within the other branch of the quantum level, which arises from within another part of the QTF data state that is not part of the standard model. To the contrary, once the photon contacts a detector, or the detector screen, it only functions within the physics within the standard model. Because we act with free will, the photon's behavior won't actually be changed into a small-scale event until it reaches the detection screen, or a detector at the end of the experiment, and only if the which path knowledge remained to be knowable when the photon ended its journey. Thus, the animate spacetime continuum waits to make sure that the knowledge remains knowable before the photon's energy contacts the screen within a small-scale event, or within a large-scale event. As long as the which path knowledge remains knowable until the photon reaches the end of its journey, it will contact the detector as if its wave function had been collapsed at the time the which path had been detected, and as if it remained collapsed from then on, until the photon as a point particle contacted the detection screen, or a detector. There's no reason that the QTF data state of the universe would need to use retrocausality to go back in time and cause the photon to have propagated through time and space until it ended its journey without being associated with its wave function and an electromagnetic wave. For the QTF data state of the universe simply creates the photon's energy as a point particle at the location where, and when it ended its journey, as if its wave function had been collapsed, while we erroneously believe that it actually propagated to the detector. But, since we function within the motion of time within a linear timeline, and most if not all physicists believe that electromagnetic waves actually propagate through space and time within a corporeal universe, retrocausality would be the logical reason for the photon's behavior to be changed from a large-scale event to a small-scale event, rather than from a simple change in data, where and when it ended its journey. It should be understood that it's the animate spacetime continuum that causes the photon to exist within a small-scale event when it contacts the detector at the end of the experiment, but it's the physics of the standard model that causes the photon to exist when it would have contacted the detector as if it had propagated to it at the speed of light. This explains why and how a photon changes its behavior when its which path is detected, as long as an observer can gain the knowledge. How the photon is able to know that its which path is able to be known. How the photon propagates from the location where its which path was created to the end of its journey without being in association with an electromagnetic wave and quantum wave function, irrespective if any observer gained the which path knowledge or not. It was also explained how the universe knows if the knowledge was destroyed before the photon reached the end of its journey, and if anyone had gained the knowledge prior to it being destroyed. As proposed by the Reallusion hypothesis, there are 5 phenomena that are in effect in the double-slit experiment that the general scientific community has not yet come to identify, and that are at the source of the conundrum of the measurement problem of quantum mechanics. By being aware of these phenomena that define the relationship between the QTF data state of the universe and the creation of our reality, it profoundly changes the way the double-slit and the delayed choice quantum eraser experiments are approached. Number 1. The universe exists within the embodiment of the QTF data state of the universe that has no ability to produce anything with a physical expression, a projection, or a simulation, unless an observance that was created within the brain of a virtual observer from within the QTF data state of the universe gets converted into the electromagnetic quantum data state. This causes the information that was contained in the QTF data state of the universe to be decoded within the system of physics that creates consciousness, which causes the virtual observance to become a conscious perspective within the observer's reality. Number 2. Consciousness is not created within the matter of our brains. As our brains within the QTF data state of the universe process the information that our virtual senses gather from within the embodiment of QTF data, along with processing all the information that is utilized in the creation of consciousness, our brains cannot create consciousness within itself, because it functions within the standard model of particle physics, which does not have the physics that are needed for the creation of consciousness. As all of the above information is processed within the matter of our brains from within the QTF datastate of the universe, a small amount of QTF data is added to the above QTF datastate, which converts the information into the electromagnetic quantum datastate. This tiny amount of QTF data only exists within the brains of conscious beings within the QTF datastate of the universe. The electromagnetic quantum datastate gets processed within a separate branch of the quantum level of order, or perhaps within another system of physics that we have not yet come to identify, to create our simulated reality. As we perceive the universe from within our reality, it continues to function within the physics of the Standard Model, as consciousness continues to function within a different system of physics. Number 3. Some of the things that we perceive are reallusions that are not being simulated into our consciousness with a quantum beginning, while those things that we perceive we are directly interacting with are being simulated into our consciousness with a quantum particle beginning and function within the physics of all branches of science within our perspective. Large-scale events merge these two different types of perspectives together within our consciousness, and this is the way that conscious beings and the universe share information between them. Most physicists believe that observation causes the quantum wave function to collapse, but the Reallusion hypothesis proposes that the wave function collapses within the QTF datastate of the universe, whenever and wherever the photon contacts matter of any kind, irrespective of whether or not an observer is there to observe it. This is because the QTF datastate of the universe functions within the physics of large-scale events, irrespective if an observer is present or not. Our perspective is an example of the physics within a large-scale event. The electromagnetic wave and the quantum wave function are always a reallusion that only exist within the QTF datastate of the universe, while we are only able to directly interact with a photon's energy as a point particle. Thus, as the photon interacts with our virtual eyes within the QTF datastate of the universe, its wave function will have collapsed within the QTF datastate of the universe, irrespective if the photon was absorbed into the matter of our eye, or within the matter of a piece of space dust. We believe a quantum particle's wave function has collapsed, because we measured it when doing quantum research, or observed a large-scale object with one of our 5 senses, when in actuality, the electromagnetic wave and the quantum wave function collapse within the QTF datastate of the universe, whenever the wave-photon complex contacts matter, irrespective if it is observed or not. More accurately, there is no electromagnetic wave or quantum wave function within the QTF datastate, or in our reality. It only exists in the background of the QTF datastate as the processing of data that never becomes expressed. Thus, it's like being a reallusion within the QTF datastate, as well as being a reallusion within our reality. Thus, an observer is not required for the quantum wave function to be collapsed. The large-scale event regarding a photon and its electromagnetic wave and wave function is also what causes light to act like a wave within our reality, as our reality only consists of the point particle component of the wave-photon complex. Number 4. The universe was created to be perceived, but in the absence of our perspective, the universe has no corporeal expression on its own. Therefore, for the universe to exist with an expression, it needs to be perceived. With perspective comes knowledge, and knowing something is the most fundamental aspect of knowledge. Thus, an event or information that is impossible for an observer to know, under any set of circumstances that can exist within the physics of the universe, will not occur within the QTF datastate of the universe. Since we cannot interact with a wave of electromagnetic energy with our 5 senses, we cannot gain knowledge of it, and therefore, the propagation of a wave of electromagnetic radiation does not ever need to take place within the QTF datastate of the universe, or within our reality. This is one reason it is always a reallusion. As was already explained in a previous section, the position of a photon's energy as a point particle within the properties of space and time is part of the QTF datastate of the universe. While the composition and structure of an electromagnetic wave is part of the QTF datastate of the universe, the propagation of the energy of a photon within a wave of electromagnetic radiation that propagates through space and time does not take place within the QTF datastate of the universe, or within our reality. The QTF datastate of the universe processes the data that specifies where a photon's energy will be within each consecutive Planck time, and within each Planck distance of space within the realities of conscious beings. But the photon wave complex has no energy associated with it within the QTF data state of the universe, until it contacts some form of matter, or is involved with an event that causes decoherence, which causes the QTF data state of the universe to create the photon's energy, to exist within a specific location in time and space, for a Planck interval of time, and a Planck volume of space, within an observer's reality, if the event is observed. The photon's energy in the form of a point particle only exists for a Planck time, as it is absorbed into an electron within an atom. Another equivalent photon is expelled from the electron, a Planck time later, within a wave-photon complex, which repeats the same series of events. Thus, it is impossible for us to know where a photon is while it is propagating through space, because it doesn't actually propagate through space and time. Therefore, the propagation of waves of electromagnetic radiation through space and time, and the quantum wave function, are always a reallusion. Number 5. The universe will express itself to us in a similar way that we interacted with it. For example, when we create the Witch path knowledge of a photon within the double-slit experiment, the Witch path detection involved sequestering the knowledge of the photon's Witch path from the visual information that it carried concerning its place of origin, and therefore, circumventing the photon's large-scale event. This is what causes the duplicate photon to behave as if it is no longer part of a large-scale event within the rest of the experiment. Step-by-step explanation of what is going on to cause the unexplained behaviors in the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, as proposed in the Reallusion hypothesis. The experimental apparatus in this experiment is rather complex, so rather than trying to explain the experiment itself, please check it out on YouTube. Respect Your Intellect does a particularly nice job. This experiment uses two entangled photons. Besides using two entangled photons, the experiment does not use a mechanical detector to detect the photon's Witch path. Instead of detecting the photon's Witch path by detecting the photon within a specific location in space and time, as it is being conceptualized to be propagating to the detection screen, the experiment uses a prism, lenses, mirrors, and wave splitters that allows one of the entangled photon's Witch path to be known as a function of which detector the photon ended its journey at, while the other entangled photon's Witch path cannot be known. The photon whose Witch path was not detected also has a shorter distance to travel to reach the end of the experiment than its twin, whose Witch path can be known. Here's an explanation of the physics that cause both photons to reach the detector at the end of their journey, within a small-scale event, so that neither photon's wave interacted with itself before it was detected. Let's discuss the first part of the experiment, prior to the Witch path knowledge being erased in the second leg of the experiment. Instead of one of the entangled photons getting detected by a mechanical detector that interferes with its wave function, the Witch path knowledge is gained in an indirect method via the way that the experimental apparatus is set up. Just as with the double-slit experiment, that used a mechanical detector to detect the photon's Witch path, each time the photon's wave-photon complex within the QTF data state of the universe contacts the matter of the experimental apparatus, it causes the photon's wave-photon complex to collapse, and a new identical photon is created that is also entangled with the original photon's twin. The new identical photon continues along the same path of propagation that the original photon would have, until it ends its journey at the end of the experiment. To this effect, the Witch path knowledge is gained by bypassing the physics of a large-scale event, in the same manner as the double-slit experiment. There are many more instances of a photon interacting with the matter of the experimental apparatus in this experiment, but each time that a new photon is created, it remains within the same path of propagation as its predecessor. It remains entangled with the twin, and the visual information that was contained in the initial photon is not available to an observer. This reinforces the hypothesis that the universe reacts to what an observer can know, no matter how the knowledge was obtained, or if any observer had gained the knowledge, and the universe will accommodate how it presents itself to an observer, at least on the quantum level, so that the physics in which the knowledge was gained will match the physics that a quantum particle will be expressed in. within the QTF data state of the universe. As with the double-slit experiment, this experiment was caused to occur by conscious beings, and therefore, all the information about the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, including how the which path is determined, has become part of the QTF data state of the universe. Since we act with free will, the physics of the universe doesn't have control over what a conscious being will do. Therefore, until the photon that had its which path detected reaches the detector at the end of its propagation, it cannot be determined how either of the entangled photons will reach their detectors, even though the photon whose which path is known will reach the detector after its twin reaches its detector. As long as the which path knowledge has not been erased prior to the detected photon reaching the detector at the end of its journey, and as long as no one had gained the knowledge about how the undetected photon contacted the detector at the end of its journey, which occurred before the detected photon reached the end of its journey, both photons will arrive at the detector, as if its electromagnetic wave had remained collapsed during its propagation through space and time. Through retrocausality, which is a phenomenon associated with quantum entanglement, the undetected photon, which got to its detector first, will also have ended its journey without its electromagnetic wave interacting with itself, as long as no one knew how the non-detected photon reached the detector at the end of its journey. If someone were able to know that the non-detected photon concluded its journey with its wave function intact by looking at the detector data before its entangled twin ended its journey, this would result in both photons ending their journey with their wave function intact, and many similar sequential photons, within the same situation, would create an interference pattern where they finished their journey. Since the universe and the wave-photon complex only exist within the QTF data state where time does not pass, and the past, the present, and the future all exist together, it supports the hypothesis that retrocausality, as demonstrated in the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, is caused to occur from a change in data within a virtual process. This is because everything that occurs within our reality, including when and where something occurred, had initially been coded within the QTF data state, a Planck scale of time before it occurs within our reality, and where the present, the past and the future all exist at the same time. Therefore, as retrocausality occurs within our reality, within the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, it was caused to occur by a change of data within the QTF data state of the universe, where time does not pass. As the photon that was detected finished its journey, after its non-detected twin finished its journey, the detected photon caused a data change within the QTF data state of the non-detected photon, as a function of the physics that cause information about certain properties of one photon to be shared instantaneously with its twin. From within our perspective of the passage of time, this is retrocausality, as well as information being sent between the two photons faster than the speed of light. But from within the QTF data state of the universe, it's just a matter of a change in data, which can be shared instantaneously throughout what we perceive as the universe. Both quantum entanglement and retrocausality, as well as quantum tunneling, are behaviors that are not defined within the standard model of particle physics, and are likely utilized within the branch of the quantum level that creates consciousness and our simulated reality, as these behaviors are needed to create consciousness as proposed by the Reallusion hypothesis. If these quantum behaviors are involved with the creation of our reality, they would respond to what an observer knows, or can know. Thus, when we identify these behaviors occurring to quantum particles of matter and electromagnetic energy within quantum research, the behavior is a function of the particles and physics within the standard model, being integrated into our conscious reality, where quantum entanglement and quantum retrocausality are part of the quantum level of consciousness. The reason that quantum entanglement can be utilized in quantum computing, or any other technology that utilizes the behavior, even though the particles that are entangled are not being observed within someone's conscious perspective, is because the quantum particles have been manipulated into participating in the technology by conscious beings. If quantum particles have been manipulated into becoming entangled as they function within a technology that was created by conscious beings, the QTF data state of the universe knows that the particles have been manipulated in this manner, and that an observer could know that they are entangled. As long as entangled particles remain within that technological process, it's possible that a conscious being can know about their behavior, which will allow them to continue to exhibit quantum entanglement throughout those processes that utilize quantum entanglement within the technology, even though no one had, or ever will, observe the particles. This same phenomenon occurs in the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, when one of the entangled photons had its Witch path detected, which caused it, as well as its twin, to behave within a small-scale event, even though no one needed to have gained the Witch path knowledge. As long as it's possible that someone could know that quantum entanglement is being utilized in the technology, the behavior will be able to be utilized within the technology. This reveals another aspect of how the universe and our consciousness were created to be interdependent with one another, which causes the universe to change its behavior in accordance with what is possible for an observer to know. Until mankind has been able to utilize the physics of consciousness within technologies that utilize quantum entanglement, as well as within quantum experiments like the double slit and the delayed choice quantum eraser experiments, all technological advancements and research had utilized only the physics within the standard model, and therefore, within all the branches of science that utilize the physics of matter and electromagnetic energy at the large scale, and within large-scale events. But, as proposed by the Reallusion hypothesis, quantum entanglement and retrocausality are two examples of quantum behaviors that do not occur as a function of the standard model of particle physics, but are rather involved with the creation of consciousness, and within the other branch of the quantum level, in whatever manner it may exist in. Thus, being able to utilize quantum entanglement and retrocausality involves the birth of a new branch of science that is based on using the physics of consciousness to edit what occurs within the QTF data state of the universe through thought, rather than doing an action. The general premise of this hypothesis may define the mechanism that allows someone who is able to reach the highest state of meditation to have out-of-body experiences. The second leg of the experiment involves an addition of extra beam splitters and mirrors to erase our ability to know the Witch path of either of the photons as they are caused to continue on a longer path through the second leg of the experiment. When this is done, and we only use the detectors that are used at the end of the second leg of the experiment, both detectors will demonstrate that the electromagnetic waves and the quantum wave function of both photons were intact when they contacted the detectors at the end of the experiment. Since it was impossible for any observer to know the Witch path knowledge of the photon that had initially been detected within the first leg of the experiment, because that detector was either not turned on, or its data was not being collected, no knowledge of the Witch path observation exists within the universe. If it's impossible for an observer to know an event had occurred under any set of circumstances that exist at the time, the event will not happen within the QTF data state of the universe. Since it was made impossible to know the Witch path knowledge of the detected photon after the Witch path knowledge had been erased, and no one had gained the Witch path knowledge before it was erased, the physical act of doing the detection will have occurred in the QTF data state of the universe, and within our reality, but the Witch path knowledge that was created will not exist within the QTF data state of the universe, and therefore it will not have happened. The second leg of the experiment relies on the previous other detectors being turned off, or for no data to have been created for what they observed, for if the Witch path knowledge that was created in the first leg of the experiment was left intact, the Witch path knowledge would still exist after it was later erased within the second leg of the experiment, and both photons would have ended their journey without an interference pattern. A much more detailed explanation of the Reallusion hypothesis can be found on YouTube, under the author's name, Jonathan Sumber, which includes 5 audio videos. Although this essay gives a much more in-depth explanation than either the YouTube presentation or the book with regard to how the measurement problem of quantum mechanics is solved, the book includes a comprehensive explanation of the two spectrums of energy hypothesis, as well as a much more comprehensive explanation of the Reallusion hypothesis, which includes many other topics. The website for the book The 4 States of Reality is https://www.4statesofreality.com